Are there external factors that can cause your spiritual awakening to slow or stop altogether? So when I hear this question, usually the first thing that I could feel in the question is that there's a fundamental misconception about what spiritual awakenings are and what happens when we awaken. And the fundamental misconception is that when you awaken, the path forward is constantly moving in a linear fashion, one day at a time, really fast. And if you ever stop from that, something's going wrong with your spiritual awakening. That is the fundamental misconception. And so I want to cut that myth. I want to cut the legs off of that myth, because a spiritual awakening, first of all, it's not linear and it isn't going at the same speed. That's not how a spiritual awakening works. But another thing that happens when people have this belief is that we're templated to be in masculine dominant energy. And so even when we have a spiritual awakening, when we're starting off the spiritual awakening, that masculine energy, that yang energy of action, it wants to keep leading. And so that's why we have this belief that if I'm not constantly moving forward at a really fast rate, something's wrong with my spiritual awakening. I'm doing something wrong, okay? So I want to cut that myth. It's absolutely not true. And the way really to understand this is, first of all, to understand that a spiritual awakening is not linear, moving quickly and fast in a linear way constantly, okay? That's not how it works. That's not how any of life works, really. So the way that you can think of a spiritual awakening, my best way of understanding a spiritual awakening is to mimic the cycles of nature, to look at nature. Look at the cycles of nature, and then you're going to understand what a spiritual awakening really is, okay? So what do I mean by this? When you look at nature, there are cycles of spring and then summer and then winter. Okay, so there's a contraction in winter. All of the flowers kind of die down, and snow and cold kind of fills the air. And there's a little bit of sleepiness in winter, right? Things are darker in winter. There's not really a lot of things growing in winter. Then spring comes and all of the beautiful flowers come in. Everything starts to bloom. So there's this contraction energy in winter and an expansion energy in spring, okay? And I could talk about this with various different things in nature, right? There's this kind of contraction, expansion, stop, go, okay? And this is exactly what happens in your spiritual awakening. When we go through cycles of spiritual awakening where nothing's happening, a lot of times the mind wants to say, what did I do wrong? Did my spiritual awakening stop? Is there something going on? But it's not. It's just that you're in a cycle of contraction, all right? Contraction cycles have a lot to do with more feminine energy. So, and that's how the spiritual awakening really is supposed to go. I move forward and I expand so much with that beautiful masculine energy, and then a certain cycle comes in and I'm now called to contract and go in and down and deep and be still and be in the dark, almost like a seed. When you plant a seed stays under that soil for quite a while before it finally comes up through the dirt. Okay, so that contraction state, that's a very feminine energy state, and that's what's happening during your spiritual awakening. This happens many times, actually. It happened to me. It happens pretty much to everybody. These contraction cycles and expansion cycles are a really important part of your spiritual awakening, and don't run from them. Don't feel uncomfortable, because really what's happening is when you feel uncomfortable when things are paused, when things stop, when everything stops, when the energy contracts and you're being asked to go inward, when nothing is going on in your outside environment, instead of thinking, what's wrong? Something's wrong. I need to do something about it. I'm starting to get restless. You can catch that it's your masculine energy that's restless because the masculine wants to be on the go. And you just take that opportunity and you say to yourself, wow, okay, I seem to be still in masculine dominance, so I'm going to train in my feminine. I'm going to go into my feminine. I'm not stuck. There's nothing wrong. Everything is fine. There doesn't always have to be things happening on the outside for me to enjoy life and to really be grateful for life. So right now I seem to be on a pause. I seem to be in a contraction moment in my spiritual awakening. I'm in a contraction moment in my life where my energy is pulling in, it's contracting in, and I'm going to learn how to work with that. I'm going to learn how to work with the phases of expansion as well as I work with the phases of contraction. I have to learn. So what's the difference? When you're in phases of expansion, that's pretty easy. That's masculine dominant energy. So that means you're out there, you're doing things, you're going to online courses, you're doing a bunch of different things. Life is moving, opportunities are presenting themselves, and you're just doing this and that and the other. Those are phases of expansion, and those are beautiful, and it's wonderful, and it's delicious when you're in these beautiful phases of expansion. But what I've learned from personal experience, and you know what, I'm sharing this because this is something that I struggled with too. This was one of my greatest struggles, was to develop this beautiful feminine energy because I'm naturally masculine dominant by nature. And so coming into my feminine wasn't a comfortable process for me. But what happened was I started to discover that if I stopped fighting the contraction moments, if I stopped panicking or feeling restless when times of contraction and nothingness appeared in my life, I started to just reformulate the way I was talking to myself. So I stopped saying that times of contraction I was blocked or I was stuck, because we use these words a lot. When things aren't moving, we say we're stuck, we're blocked, where something's going on. We use these words. But just because something isn't moving doesn't mean we're stuck, right? Like if I park my car on the street and I turn it off, my car's not stuck, right? I would never use the word stuck by just parking my car in the street, right? I stop my car, I park it, and I turn it off. It doesn't mean it's stuck. So because something stops doesn't mean it's stuck. And so I reformulated the way that I spoke to myself about these contraction moments in my spiritual awakening. When things stopped, I no longer used the word stuck. I no longer used the words blocked. And I said, okay, all right, I can feel it. I'm starting to go into a contraction energy. I'm starting to go into a contraction phase. What can I do? Well, I'm going to play with the feminine. I'm going to learn to be in my feminine nature. I'm going to learn to flow. I'm going to learn to sit and meditate more. I'm going to learn to dance. I'm going to learn, you see, like all of these beautiful characteristics of feminine energy. I'm going to learn to be patient, because maybe this contraction moment in my spiritual awakening is a moment of teaching me patience. And I'm going to learn patience. I'm going to learn that everything happens in the exact time and that I don't have to worry about it. I'm going to learn that I don't need to struggle in life, that I don't need to push, that I don't need to be constantly in effort mode. I'm going to learn. I'm going to take this opportunity that the energy is contracting and nothing is happening in my life. I'm going to use this time to just learn how to be in this beautiful energy, to learn how to be grateful, to learn how to feel abundance, to learn how to really be okay when the energy is paused. It's just a different way of seeing things, right? And then sooner or later, the energy is going to open up again, and you'll be in an expansion cycle again, and you just keep going like this: contraction, expansion, contraction, expansion. That's really what a spiritual awakening is about. But as soon as you start to reformulate the way that you speak about these moments of pause during a spiritual awakening and in your life, when we reformulate the way that we speak about it and we stop giving it a negative connotation, everything changes, and you're going to start to really savor these beautiful contraction moments, because you're going to realize that these are wonderful moments to pause, to flow more with life, to be in my beautiful feminine energy, to feel, to connect. So they're beautiful, beautiful moments. You just have to create that mastery of being comfortable, whether your life is in expansive mode and you're having a bunch of opportunities, or whether your life is in a contraction mode right now and things are paused for higher purposes. I hope this helps.